There's a well-known chant, I suppose you could say that, and also on a placard that we often see in marches around social justice: no justice, no peace. So that's what we're going to be looking into this week and next week. But at the beginning here, I just wanted to remind people about taking care of ourselves. I have a tab on my website that has a bunch of different practices. And one of them is to stand and shake it out. And so really kind of just shake your body, start from the feet and go up through your legs and your body. And that's one of the ways that we can do this. There's another one, the 4-7-8 down regulating breath. And maybe we could just do that for a minute before we start, just a couple of times. So the way it works is you breathe in for 4. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then breathe out to a count of 8. So if you find that you're getting really triggered during any of the inquiries, there's a lot of different ways that we can come back. But this 4-7-8 breathing is a really powerful practice just to kind of bring us right back into our body and down-regulate our system. I wanted to start with that. So no justice, no peace. So I think that we all intuitively know this, that when we think about what was happening last year with Black Lives Matter, for those of us who are white or people of color, we all, if we're in our body, we all have an intuitive knowing that we don't want to see this happening. We want this to stop, that we don't want to have our own happiness on the backs of someone else. We look at gender inequality. There's all kinds of different forms of exclusion and a prejudice and a oppression. And I'm sure that everybody here is aware that that's a problem, that we don't co-sign on that. We don't feel that that's the right thing. So today I wanted to really look into our own nervous systems and the experience that we have in our bodies as we experience social injustice, whether we're on the oppressor side or whether we're on the oppressed, whether we're on the, and we all have different ways that works in our life, unless you're a white male and one of the 1% in terms of money, then we all experience some kind of oppression and some kind of prejudice and injustice. So we experience that from the power down position, but we also experience it from the power over position. And some of those are obvious and some of them are subtle. I thought it would be helpful for us to explore this really gritty, uncomfortable place of looking at injustice between ourselves and within ourselves for this last 2 weeks of this. I never know what I'm going to find when I'm preparing these. It occurred to me about the game Survivor when we're talking about looking at our nervous systems. And I did a search on it, and up comes Survivor, the sport of betrayal. And then I added the bit played out through our nervous systems. And I remember watching that, I think, in its first or second season a couple of times and just being really not wanting to watch that. And yet there's something kind of fascinating about that for many people. It's a very popular show. And then it's like this, we get voted off the island or whatever, however they say that. But what it really is this really close look at who can we trust. And they would make coalitions of people. Part of the idea was to see who had enough power to win, and they would try to get the powerful ones out and who would be voted out of the tribe, which I just think is so revealing of a lot of the ways that our social interactions play out. a lot of it is really based on differences. So Audre Lorde, she died several years ago from cancer, but was very active in the 80s and 90s when I was very active in social justice. And she talks about it's not that our differences divide us, it's that we can't celebrate those differences. And Dorothy Riddle, whose picture is just below that, developed the Riddle scale of around homophobia. And she did that for the National Task Force on Lesbians and Gays. I think it was in the 1970s sometime, when it was very new that there was any kind of idea about that. And she talked about, the first kind of the bottom ones: repulsion, pity, tolerance, acceptance. Acceptance is really still on the bottom end of where we would like to be in terms of our relationship with people that are different from us. And from there we get into support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance. Like, we really want to have a world where we can appreciate each other and really, really see how rich our life can be when we have people in it that are different from us, and we can celebrate that. So, looking at the trajectory of how that happens, so in the 70s and 80s, up until the mid 80s when AIDS came along, and I came out in the early 70s, mid 70s, it was very shameful. There was a lot of, the average person didn't feel like they knew anyone who was gay. And the AIDS movement and the AIDS crisis really changed that for a lot of people, because a lot of people were like fighting against Reagan and the really poor funding for AIDS research. So a lot of people died because there was no money in research. But also a lot of people came out during that time. And I worked for an AIDS organization from 87 to 94. And I remember a guy who had the service after he died. He had the service at AIDS Calgary. And most of the people who came wore cowboy hats because his family was from southern Alberta, and they lived in a small town where it was mostly ranchers. And they looked supremely uncomfortable to be there and be around so many gay men and lesbians and heterosexual people as well, who were Kevin's friends. But that really burst something open, and we started to get to know other people who were different from us. And Rock Hudson, who is, as you all know who he is, Hollywood masculinity, and it turns out he was gay and he died of AIDS. So we have to get to know people, and then we get to, Neil Patrick Harris and his partner and children. And there's so many other examples, positive examples now, where we actually get to see from the stereotypes of what is a gay man and all of the fear and homophobia. We get to see that his family are very much like our families. There's a tipping point there where we get to see and connect with somebody and see that they're not so different than we are. So we have the God abhors you is gay. We have all of the really Christian related homophobia. And that's not at all to say that homophobia belongs in religion, but the way that it's played out, there's an association there. We have had conversion therapy. We've had all of these. When I was first involved in trying to we had a kiss-in on the steps of City Hall. I think it was 1981 or 1980. And they had sharpshooters on the buildings around us, and they had a bunch of ambulances just beside us because they were pretty convinced that there might be violence against us. And it was just like 40 people standing around, When we first wanted to have a gay pride march, they wouldn't, the mayor wouldn't declare it was Gay Pride Week. And now, a few years ago, the Calgary Mayor, Nenshi, was in the Gay Pride March, and Canada's Prime Minister was in the Gay Pride March in Toronto. So we've had this conversion of gay people. We don't know who they are. We don't we don't know any, which was not true. It's the people we're hiding. And then all of a sudden it's kind of cool to be pro-gay. And that's something, it's a complicated social change that happens. And it's not like it's all better yet either, of course. It's way more deep and complicated than just going to gay pride marches. And that is a big step. It's a big step to have people that you work with or people in your family who now are able to come out and say, this is who I am. It's a huge step. So I don't want to minimize that either. So this is Brene Brown. There's a line etched in dignity, and dehumanizing others crosses that line. So, obviously we don't have time in this and I don't think it's helpful either to look at all of the different ways that people are oppressed. But I chose LGBTQ and racism as two to look at as representative of what we're working with. So Resmaa Menakem, who many are familiar with now, his New York Times bestselling work, My Grandmother's Hands. And he talks about clean pain and dirty pain, and how dirty pain is when we refuse to look and to really be present with what's going on. And clean pain is what we were actually talking about a few minutes ago, where it's difficult, it's challenging, and it's the way through. We need to be able to be present with what's really going on, and that includes all the uncomfortableness. So he talks about white supremacy is a species issue. And he says, am I and others who have brown bodies monkeys or humans? And Brene Brown talks about how we can't really do violence against someone who we share humanity with, and that one of the underpinnings, the real foundations of otherism, of dehumanization, is that we stop seeing people as equal and as human and as part of us. So in the 70s and 60s and 50s, we had a very volatile situation going on around segregation in schools. And I thought this was interesting. One of the placards is that forced integration creates racial hatred. And I think what the real fear there was that integration and really getting to know people from other races as people, as other human beings, leads to mixed race friendships and marriages. So there's an attempt to keep people together because we can't really dehumanize someone who we know. We can't really, that doesn't work. We need to have that distance in order to do that. Let's stop here and take a pause and look at a couple of ways that our nervous system works. So one is, if you feel safe to me, we have some kind of a connection of being cared for. So I've been cared for, loved, protected by people who look like you. So if you haven't ever had an experience of being a friend or being somehow connected with someone of a different skin color, you're not going to have that experience in your nervous system. So if we haven't had that experience, then we're going to have at least a curiosity, maybe at the best, but most likely our nervous system is going to have some fear. And a lot of this, I think, comes from that ancestral suspicion of outsiders competing for resources. So, most people lived in small groups or tribes of, 20 to 50 people. And that was how the hunter-gatherer evolution of human beings came through. And in that situation, another group was a threat because they might take our food, they might come and do something harmful to us. And so we have this evolutionary thing built in, and this is our neuroception, and that's unconscious. It's our unconscious perception of threat. So anyone who doesn't feel familiar feels like, well, they might be dangerous. So we're saying, I don't have enough experience to predict how you will behave, and I don't know if you're going to be safe for me because you're unfamiliar. And so here we go with the nervous system, the familiarity, the unfamiliarity really, really plays into this. And several years ago, I was talking with a friend who had been on a subway stop in a platform in Toronto. It was relatively late at night. There was hardly anybody around. There was two women, herself, a black woman, and a woman who was white. And they were standing there, and a group of guys came in, and they were loud and aggressive and saying really sexually aggressive things. And the two women kind of looked at each other and kind of stood a little bit closer together until one of the guys said something derogatory about the black woman being black. And all of a sudden, the white woman kind of moved away a little bit. So that's unconscious, that's neuroception. And it was really, really a stark kind of a pointer for the black woman of until the racism came in, they were together as women who were in a dangerous situation. And then now all of a sudden she's in more danger because the white woman is not standing with her anymore. So not to excuse or to comment on what happened right now, I'm bringing that up because it's a neuroception. It's our perception of threat and who are we aligned with. So the white woman then became a little bit more aligned with the white men and a little less aligned with the black woman because her best chance of survival in that situation was to align through her whiteness. So let's do this inquiry. Notice your breath and body right now and your relative state of relaxation. So let's take a moment to do that. Take a deep breath. Notice where in your body you feel tight. You might feel it across your neck and shoulders, your upper back. You might notice you're clenching your teeth, or maybe you're holding your breath. So let's take a moment. You could do the 4-7-8 breathing. Just let yourself come back to a little bit of a state of relaxation. And now bring to mind someone who is like you, someone you're familiar with, someone that you feel safe with. If you want, and you're familiar and safe with me, you could imagine me. Just look at my face on the screen, or somebody else that you feel safe with. Just take a moment and really, in your mind's eye, bring that person up. Let your shoulders settle. Let your breath become smoother. Remember times maybe when you've had a good interaction with this person. You've gone for a walk together, or had lunch, or when you see them come into the room, or whatever it might be. You see their name on your phone. And notice how you feel in your body. What impact does that have on your nervous system? And then bring to mind a person who's not like you. And so a classic example might be if you're a woman, any man on a street, especially at night. It might be someone who looks dangerous, like someone who's homeless, or someone who's talking to themselves, or something like that. Someone who's a little bit volatile. Or it might be a memory of somebody who actually did hurt you. So just notice, what do you feel in your body as you visualize someone who's not like you, who you don't have that feeling of safety? And again, notice your breath. Notice what tightens up in your body. Notice if you need to back away from this, that's fine. Just go into something else that will take care of you. We're just looking and observing what's going on in our nervous system right now. And then bring that to a close. And then see if you can find somebody who is not like you in some aspects, but who is somebody that you know and trust. And so if you're drawing a blank on that, I'm a lesbian, maybe you're not. And so maybe that could be something where we have some things in common. You know me, you trust me, or have some warm feelings towards me because you're here. But there's that part of me that you don't share, or maybe you do. I know there are some other lesbians here. But just to see, maybe you're a person of color and you're thinking about a white person who's a close friend, or whatever that might be, see if you can find someone in your range who's not like you in some ways, but is someone you trust and you know. And notice how you feel, what happens in your body when you notice that. It might be that as a woman, there are many men you don't trust, but you can bring to mind someone you do trust. Or it might be someone who has different ideas politically that you still share something with that's strong enough that you feel like you can be connected with them. And stay really present with your body and breath. Notice what's coming through your mind. And then let that move to the background. Come back into just kind of breathing for a moment. And notice your body, your breath. And now bring to mind a group of people who would come to a special event. So, like a wedding, a housewarming, a graduation, a funeral. And as you bring to mind, a dozen people or 2 dozen or however that might be, notice how they are like you and how they are not like you. So it could be race, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, class, financial success. How are they like you? For instance, if you're white, is everybody there white? Is everyone about your age? Are they family? Are they friends? Are they people from work? Just take a look at that panoramic view. And in COVID, it's going to be harder to maybe imagine everybody getting together, but maybe put them all on a Zoom screen if you need to. And just kind of sift through, 3 or 4 people. How is that person like you? And how are they different, not like you? And what is it that draws you together? So some is family. Oftentimes our families are very diverse. In siblings, especially, we might have very different political views or different interests. Those relationships are complicated. But even without looking at family, what about the other people that are there? And what is it you share with them? Geography might be part of it. Maybe they're neighbors, someone that lives on your street or in your community. It might be an interest. Maybe you go to a book group together or your colleagues. Maybe you love model trains and you've gotten to know the people over the years. It could be that you volunteer with people. What is it that brings you together with people who are not like you in particular? And continue to notice what it feels like in your nervous system. So these are people who are different somehow, and we have something that's bringing us together. And there aren't any shoulds here. There's not a gold star for hanging around with people that you don't connect with. We connect with people who are like us in some ways, and people who have some kind of a connection that's strong enough can help us to overcome what separates us. So that's part of what we're looking at here. So we have some kind of window of tolerance of being around people who aren't exactly like us, but who we still feel a connection with or we feel safe with. So there's something that causes that connection. So this is maybe a way that we could bridge some of that gap. Part of what I was referring to with the Neil Patrick Harris picture there is that we have this feeling of we're getting to know people, and Ellen through her TV show and all of the different celebrities, but also people that we work with or people in our family, as we get to know people who are different from us, we get to see that they are human just like us. And so this inquiry kind of sets up those conditions where we can maybe have a look at it when we might not have that experience in our personal life. So if you imagine a close friend who's in some kind of a difficult circumstance, so divorce, being bullied at work, being ill, betrayed by a friend, grieving a loss, whatever it might be, and just bring to mind whatever you're feeling, and bring them in close to your heart and notice and cultivate compassion and empathy for them. So even if we haven't experienced divorce personally, we might really have some other experiences, some other loss that we could kind of have an understanding. Yeah, I think that's really difficult. And maybe we've had long conversations about it, or maybe we've really stepped in to support them during a process, or whatever example you're looking at. So notice your body and breath, and notice how you feel warm hearted, compassionate. Really let that come to a fullness in your experience, in your body, your energy, your breath, your mind. We really feel for people who are suffering, people we care about, people we're close to. And then bring to mind someone who's not like you and imagine them in the same circumstance. And what do you kind of theorize or project that they might feel? Would they feel the same? Would they feel different? And so, one example that comes to mind is a child in school. And, maybe we have our own child or grandchild or someone that we know, and we want them to have a safe experience in school. We want them to be connected and challenged intellectually and have a good social experience. And then we might think of someone who isn't in that situation. Maybe they're in a school in a really tough neighborhood. And how would they feel? So just to kind of compare back and forth from whatever example you're working with. Do you feel like this other person would feel in a similar way as your friend? What would be different and what would be the same? And bring them in close to your heart as well. Notice and cultivate compassion and empathy for them. Notice the thoughts that are coming up in your mind. And sometimes we do kind of an automatic pushing it aside. Well, we put them over there because it's uncomfortable. So that's okay if that's what's coming up. That's just primitive brain generated. It's just our nervous system, our neuroception. But then see if you could let that soften and settle a bit. Breathe. Notice your breath. Let your body settle. And notice if you feel any hard-heartedness. And that might be explaining it away or some kind of defensiveness. And then just see if you could let that drop a bit and bring them close into your heart again. This is another human being who might be suffering. And then let that come to a rest. And that might have generated a lot of different examples, or you might have kind of frozen up a bit, or whatever happened. It's fine just to notice that. And then put that aside, come back into just noticing your body and your breath. And then bring to mind your friend, the person who is not like you, and yourself. So, all three of us together. Let's just take a moment to maybe be present in your heart. Put your hand on your heart if you want. And just nurture this heartfelt wish for ease. For ourselves, for people we care about, and for people we don't care about, maybe that we feel kind of disconnected with. See if you can bring that person into your heart as well. And as you breathe out, send out a wish for ease, compassion, connection. Take a few deep breaths. And before we come back to the group, let's take another minute or so just to kind of notice what came up. Are you judging yourself around what came up? Did you see anything that made you uncomfortable? Did you notice that at some points you pulled back? Just notice, what did you feel? And what are you feeling right now? Can you kind of settle into and then when you're ready, open your eyes.